I was a gang member. I was a killer. I was a sociopath.
I was sexually molested pretty much my whole life.
Got a taste of this violence. It's scary, but it felt good.
Talk about this shameful little secret.
It was so traumatic. Satan stole my virginity.
I was standing at the gates of hell.
It's been an incredible journey. It's so emotional because it's just transformed my life.
Your suffering's come to an end.
It was like a dark tunnel, but all of a sudden, at the end of that tunnel, I could see a little light.
It just came pouring out of me. And then everything changed.
My whole life is different.
Forgiveness, hope, and ultimate redemption. God, the one you've been searching for, was real.
I would not be standing here today if it wasn't for a miracle. So these are just some articles that were published a long time ago when I was very sick and I needed a kidney transplant to survive. And the law at the time just didn't allow me to find a donor by someone that we didn't already know. And so my family basically started a campaign, and the media met us that way, and we were able to really get our story out there and let people know I was looking for a kidney. Yeah, so they're important to me now because I like looking at it, and I'm amazed how much what has happened in this amount of time. Looking back, this feels like a lifetime ago, and I just look through it and I just think, wow, everything worked out, but in such a different way than I could have ever anticipated.
Well, Loni, your story is about defying all the odds. It's a story that gained international attention. It's about a terrible disease. It's about God. So let's go back to the very beginning. When did your family realize that there was a problem, and how serious was it?
So when I was 10 months old, I started getting these reoccurring kidney infections, and no one could figure out what the cause was, and it was getting very serious. I was constantly in the hospital. I was more in the hospital than not in the hospital. I had continuous tests, procedures, corrective surgery, and nothing seemed to be working. By the age of 4, they diagnosed me with a rare autoimmune disorder, and they determined that my body was attacking my kidneys, and by the time I was 16, it had completely destroyed them. So when I look at this picture, this is an 8-year-old girl who's on so many steroids, and my heart really is sad for her because she has this big moon face. She's bullied at school. She's called names like monk and fat, and she's just a hurting little girl who is taking these medications like her life depended on it, because it did.
As you're struggling with all of these feelings and thoughts, you cry out to God. You have this plea that you made as a young girl to God. Mm-hmm. Can you describe what happened when you made this plea?
I would cry out to God and just say, God, if you're all powerful, why can't you come intervene into my circumstances? Why can't you take away my pain? And I remember this one day in particular, I was sitting alone and I felt just so rejected and heartbroken, like the weight of the world on my shoulder. And I just felt this presence come in, and I felt this peace just saturate into my heart and kind of in the atmosphere, I would say. And I knew that it was God, and he sat with me. I couldn't see him, but I could just feel this presence. And he spoke to my heart and he said, Loni, I love you and I have a purpose for you. And so I had this sense of security in that moment, and I really held on to that for years.
You're 16, and then you experienced full kidney failure. By 19, you were given less than a year to live. You were going to die. That was the medical message. But you received another message from a woman named Anita. Her message, was it medical? Was it spiritual? And what did she tell you, and what effect did it have on you?
So this one day, I'm standing in this worship service, and Anita, who I'd not met yet, was standing behind me, and we were We were worshiping God. I was praying and asking God for a miracle. And Jesus appeared to her in the spirit, holding 2 kidneys. And he said to her, "These kidneys are for Loni, and I'm giving them to you to put into her." And Anita didn't really have a grid for this. I think neither of us did. So the best she could, she took the kidneys and she just put them into me. She told me about it, and we were completely ecstatic because in my view, that meant I'd been praying and asking God to heal my body. I didn't know that if I was gonna have an eligible kidney donor with less than a year to live. So I thought, wow, this means that God had totally provided for me supernaturally. He's gonna heal my body. I'm gonna come off dialysis. I'm not gonna need a kidney transplant. This was like the best news ever. And I told everybody, I said, guess what? God has healed me. He's given me these supernatural kidneys. And weeks went by, and instead of my health getting better, it actually started to get a lot worse. And I was starting to feel the tension of this, and I'm thinking, why is this happening? I'm still going to dialysis. My health is really deteriorating. I don't feel well. And I called Anita and I said, "Anita, why are these kidneys not manifesting? What do I need to do here? Is it possible that God could change his mind? Could he be mad?" I had all these questions. She said, "I see a 3 and a 5 related to your miracle. I'm not sure what that means, but I know what I saw." She was certain.
So that faith that you're believing, you had an operation to receive a kidney that came from an uncle, I believe, and you're 20 years of age. But when you wake up and realize what actually happened, can you describe how you felt?
So when I woke up from surgery, I was, I'm kind of cloudy, but I wanted to ask the nurse, like, did you see my kidneys? So I'm kind of not really making a lot of sense coming off the anesthetic. And she said, "Congratulations, sweetheart. You just had a kidney transplant and it was very successful." And I had a real swirl of emotions in that moment because it can't be understated that on the one hand, I am extremely thankful to my uncle for giving me a part of his body to save my life, because if he hadn't done that, I would have died. And I'll always be thankful to him for that. On the other hand, I wasn't sure what this meant in terms of my relationship with God. At the time, I had all of these questions and I really didn't know how to process it because kind of on the outside looking in, this was supposed to be the happiest day, of my life. My life was just saved. And yet inside, even though I was celebrating this great gift from my uncle, I was heartbroken about what this meant with my relationship with God.
You'd think life would have been exciting and you would have felt like I've just been reborn, in a sense, but it wasn't that way. It was like a storm cloud moved in, darkness began to cover you, and a number of things happened, like there was depression and so forth. So can you kind of describe what those next 9 to 10 years were like?
They were the worst years of my life so far, and hopefully ever. I was just in so much pain. I had that self-hatred cycle never stopped in me, and I constantly had to battle chatter in my mind about you're ugly, you're stupid, you're worthless, you're a loser, etc., etc. And this is how I saw myself. And after a while, I needed something to numb the pain. I couldn't seem to manage it anymore. And I had access to prescription medications. I tried recreational drugs, and I did whatever I could to numb this pain.
You had mentioned to me previously about a spirit of death. What do you mean by that?
So at this point, I'm 29. My transplant has failed. I've been back on dialysis for 2 years, and I'm feeling lost, hopeless, and I start to feel this tangible tug on my soul. It was asking me to surrender my will to live. And the reason I didn't want to give my will to live is because I knew that I didn't have a relationship with God, and I was concerned that I would actually go to hell if I gave up my will to live. And so I battled this thing for weeks. This kept going on. I got to the point where I was so worn down that now this spirit, it saw the opportunity to just strike, and it started cursing me right on the spot, saying, "Your life is worth nothing. Nobody cares if you live or die. There's no hope for you." And it's shooting arrows right at the deepest, most tender part of my heart. And I'm actually curled over like this saying, no, you can't have my will to live, but these curses are weakening me. And that's when I started to wrestle, and just in my heart, I just cried out to God and said, God, I wish that I knew you. I wish that I knew that you loved me, and I don't know how to be in favor with you. I don't know what it means to have a relationship with you, but I wish that you were here, was basically my heart's cry in that moment.
And that's when spiritually things changed for you.
That's when everything changed.
So describe that moment. What was that like?
I hear this rushing water, and then I hear the voice, and it said, stand up. And so I immediately just stood up, and my mind filled with this bright light. And I instantly knew that in that moment, I was in the presence of the Father. And I started to feel, well, first I saw the words, I love you, you are loved, you are accepted. And I started to feel this tangible love just falling on me, resting on me like a weighted blanket. And I thought, whoa, this is the love of God is real, and you've come. And I actually had this sense in that moment that him and I had both been waiting for this moment for a very long time. I couldn't really explain it, but I just knew that he'd been waiting for this, and this was a moment I'd been waiting for. And I saw these chains breaking off in my mind, and that spirit that was chasing me just seemed like nothing. It was just, didn't even think of it. Couldn't stand in the presence of God. He began to pull out the lies that I was believing and replace them with truths of my spiritual identity, how much he loves me, that I'm a daughter, that I'm spiritual royalty. And I started to just have a whole new life. Everything changed after that.
So just so I understand, that day you would say Loni became born again.
I would say that, for sure.
Now, becoming this new creation in Christ spiritually, physically, yet you were still sick in body. If I understand, about a year later, you're 30, 31, you're married, as you mentioned, with a husband, but interestingly enough, you because of your condition, you couldn't have children. And in fact, because of your physical condition, if I've got this correct, you had a 1% chance of conceiving and less than a 1% chance to carry that child. But a miracle happens. Mm-hmm. Can you explain what took place then?
Between the medical news and our own experience, we just thought, yeah, this can't happen. And during that time, I was starting to feel so grieved that I may never experience pregnancy and be a mom. And it was just one of the greatest desires of my heart. And so I started talking to God about it. And I just said, God, I'm hurting and I'm grieved that I may never be able to have children. And I just started pouring out my heart to him that way. A couple months later, I went for an ultrasound, just a routine ultrasound. I wasn't feeling well. I had all kinds of symptoms, but I never thought pregnancy. I went for an ultrasound and they discovered that I was 9.5 weeks pregnant. And I was thrilled and also kind of shocked in a very good way. And I remember thinking and that's when God just said to me, I care about the desires of your heart. I care about that. And you can learn to trust me, because I was still struggling to trust him after this whole kidney thing. I still didn't really understand that. And he never dismissed it. He more just said, let's put it to the side for now. And right now, let's focus on what your desire for your child is. And so I found out I was pregnant, and we were just thrilled.
You gave birth to this incredible miracle. It's a boy, a wonderful bundle of joy that came into your life. But the doctors told you after that your recovery, because of your condition, would be long. And they also said to you that you may not see his high school graduation. Mm-hmm. Now, why? And then what did you do when you heard that news?
My son was born at 28 weeks, and I at first was really sad that he was born that early. I found out a couple months after he was born that while I was pregnant, a doctor had inserted this central line that was supposed to hover just over my heart, but instead he put it through the valve of my heart. So during my pregnancy, not only is pregnancy have a huge demand on the heart on its own, but with dialysis and not knowing that this valve wasn't closing properly, was putting all this pressure, And so when we found that out, I went for further tests and they saw that this had actually caused significant damage to my heart in the context of pregnancy. And that's when the cardiologist told me, I'm sorry to say, but if nothing else goes wrong from here, at most you can hope to live long enough to see your son graduate high school.
And you cried out to God when you heard that? What did you do?
Yeah, you know what? That was such a hard time for me because not only did I hear that, but I also heard that I may not be put back on the transplant list because I had all these antibodies from different blood transfusions. I had an iron toxicity, which basically I had boils all over my face, my hair was falling out, and I just felt, even though God had done this amazing miracle, the sequence of miracles, and yeah, I started crying out to God and I would hear him say, speak life. And the verse was highlighted to me about the power of life and death is in the tongue. And I began to study that verse, and God taught me something through that where I learned that my words are significant. Even if I'm in what feels like a hopeless and powerless state, my words matter and they're significant. And so I began to study scriptures related to healing, and I began to echo God's word back to him to say, God, I will not live and die, but declare the works of the Lord. Your word says that by the stripes of Jesus I'm healed. And I began to just declare this over myself no matter what my physical circumstances looked like. It was very challenging. I didn't always do it perfect, but I was committed to seeing the full breakthrough of this miracle.
And the miracle would come when you received new kidneys.
Right.
So you turned 35 years of age. According to the doctors, your medical clock is ticking down. But God, the God you believe in, is right on schedule. So explain to me what then happens and what actually brings you to the place today of being able to sit before me to tell your story. The kidneys. What did you learn? How did they come? What's the miracle that took place?
Going back to when I was 32, I looked down at this paper and I saw 3-2, and I thought 32, and then I thought, if 3-2 is age 32, maybe 3-5 is age 35. And if you recall, Anita had said there's a 3 and a 5 related to your miracle. And so I thought, could 35 be the age that I will receive these miracle kidneys? And I had new hope. And so for my 35th birthday, one of my best friends, Chelsea, she didn't know anything about this prophetic word. By now, I had hidden this in my heart now for years. So here's a card that's important to me. Loni, I felt God wanted to give you a key to his storehouse this year, and there will be many blessings inside for you. And so here's the necklace that they gave me, and it just has a key, and it has a circle on it that says healed on it. It says healed, and when they put it on me, they just said, we just believe that this is the year that you're going to be healed. And she said, I wrote healed because I believe that you're healed, and I believe also that this is going to be a year of extravagant gifts for you. And so I wore this necklace, and I told her about it right away. I said, that's so amazing that you said that, because this whole thing happened with Anita and the 3 and the 5, and I explained it to her. A couple months later, about 4 months later, Chelsea and her husband and myself and my husband, we were sitting in our home, and Chelsea just asks, how long until you can get a kidney on the transplant list? And I said, probably 7 or 8 years. And she said, no, let's agree for a breakthrough in the next 24 hours. So all 4 of us just said, amen, we agree for a breakthrough in 24 hours. Less than 24 hours later, I get a call from the transplant office saying, Loni, we have a kidney for you. And I was just thinking, whoa, you do? I was, anyways, I had a whole mix of emotions about that. On the way to the hospital, I actually was struggling a little bit because I thought, okay, I know we prayed for 24-hour breakthrough, but I'm still thinking it's going to be these miracle supernatural kidneys, and this seems to be coming in the form of a transplant. And I actually had to wrestle with that to be like, again, this is coming in the form of a transplant. Is this from God? I'm still not sure yet, and I'm really overwhelmed by emotions. When I get in the appointment with the doctor, she says, this match is a perfect match. It's a 0.00001% chance of finding this good of a match. And I felt in that moment, I kind of had this confirmation that, well, this must be from the Lord. And it sounds silly that I even questioned it, but I just, from my past experience, I was just really wanted to be careful how I navigated through this. So we went ahead with the transplant. I decided I was just going to thank God all the way through. And when I woke up from my surgery, my husband came and was standing at my bedside. And he said, he had tears in his eyes, which was unusual for him. And he said, Loni, something amazing has just happened. And he said, a friend of the family that your mom was talking to had just passed away the same time that you got a call for your transplant. He was an organ donor. He had the same blood type as you. We know that your kidney came from the same city where he lived. And I thought, well, who is it? And he said, it's Terry, Anita's husband, the woman who prophesied over you 16 years ago about the 3 and the 5. You just received her husband's kidney while you're 35 years old. And not only is it a perfect match, but it's second only to an identical twin. And they actually told her that this kidney went to a 35-year-old woman in Alberta who was so highly sensitized, this would be her only chance to receive a kidney transplant. And that the match was so good, it was second only to an identical twin.
How did that make you feel?
I was honestly so overwhelmed. It answered so many of my questions that I had been carrying for so long. I felt grieved for my friend Anita that she had lost her husband that day. But I was also thankful that God had answered these questions and this wondering that I'd wondered about for so long. And he taught me a lot about himself through that process. The Lord has appointed times for things, and he has ways of doing things that I didn't have a paradigm for up until that moment. He gave me new understanding of how he operates.
Loni, one final question. If someone's watching and listening to your story today, and they find themselves in a situation where in the natural it's hopeless, it's impossible. If they're listening to your story, what would you tell them right now?
Just tell God what your needs are. And there's no need that he can't meet. And there's no special wording. There's no formula that you have to say to talk to God. He's close and he cares. And he can touch every area of your life. He can weave your story together in ways that you can't even imagine. I know he did it for me. He can change your story overnight. That's the power of this God. And so I would just want to release that to someone and just say, just talk to God. Just tell him, share your heart, tell him what your needs are. He's there and he's listening. He cares very much.
If you want to learn more about the gospel of Jesus Christ and how it can transform your life, you can request a free Bible by calling toll-free 1-888-482-4253 or visit www.gideons.ca/request. You can begin your journey with Christ now.